Hello everyone, welcome back. This time I'm going to try to finish the pre-cinema vampire stuff. Hopefully I can get this done in one video. I've only got two stories left to tell, one of which I'm sure you already have an idea what it is if you watched my last video, and obviously you probably can already guess what the second story is going to be too. I'm going to try to get through this one pretty quick. Hopefully, I say that every video, but I'm going to really try this time to get through it quick. Not really too much left to cover. Mostly because everything else that I talked about in the previous videos, I don't really have to re-mention too much in this one. I can just kind of reference a few things, and you know where I'm coming from. So that saves on a lot of time. Before I begin this one, though, I just want to wish everybody out there a happy Halloween. I bet you're all wondering, like, Mike, what are you doing for Halloween? Well, nothing so far, and if you're thinking I've been sitting around watching vampire movies, actually I haven't been. I had my fill for a while looking into all this, so I'm kind of taking a break from vampire movies, actually. Pardon me. Taking a break, and I've actually been watching the Alien movies. Finished the original by Ridley Scott, and on the James Cameron sequel, Aliens. So that's kind of how, among other horror classics, of course. I could probably do a whole video on other horror movies that I'm fans of, but that's what I've been doing. And I'm taking a little time. I'm kind of vegging out, and I thought to myself, well, you know what? Halloween's just around the corner, and I want to get this finished, within the month, just for the season and all that. It can be kind of odd talking about this stuff in November. But I kind of want to get this finished before Halloween. So I got this video, and I've got one more planned, and hopefully I can cram it all in before tomorrow, which is Halloween. So with that said, let's finish this up, and we're going to pick up in this video. Last video mentioned Varney the Vampire, and how Varney started a lot of things. He started, of course, the fangs, the idea of the sympathetic vampire, the idea that somebody's been around somewhere, proof that they've been around in the past prior to where they are in the story. A lot of other things that originated with Varney as well, but there's one thing that in all of these stories so far, the vampire, Polidori, Varney, something's missing. There's something not in those stories that comes about in our next story, which is the 1872 story by J. Sheridan Le Fanu called Carmilla. And what's different about this story is actually two things. But the most important thing is it introduces the first female vampire. And that's the title character, Carmilla. And the second thing is it introduces something that, for my generation, was, an idea that was very important to kind of keep vampire stories going through the 80s and 90s, and even to today. And that is the teenage vampire. That's right, the teenage vampire starts with Carmilla, over 100 years ago. And actually, maybe longer than that. Well over 100 years ago. So, Carmilla is the first female vampire. And she's also, it's hinted at, it's not explicit, but also the first gay vampire, as in the first lesbian vampire. This is a theme that is picked up in movies later on. It's that they really take advantage of what's written there. It's mostly just that the story of Carmilla is that there's this girl, and she's just kind of, at the old days, she's living out in the middle of nowhere with her family, all alone, and, where the most exciting thing, the thing that she's looking forward to is a guest coming to the house. I mean, literally, it's just like seeing somebody else who's not a member of your family. That's the thing you look forward to all year long. Kind of hard for us to imagine in our technological age and, having cars and all that sort of stuff. living in cities and so forth. But you think the old days when small villages and you'd be miles from everywhere. There weren't cars yet, so you had to get there either by walking or by horse. So it was a different times. And what happens is they get a letter from the guy that's supposed to come visit the family, and he says that he can't come. He's got other things to do. Kind of cryptic. He kind of mentions that his daughter died suddenly, and that he's actually on the hunt. He was killed rather, and he's on the hunt for the person who killed his daughter. So that guy kind of vanishes. Meanwhile, the girl is just, she's disappointed. She's like, great, now I'm just going to be sitting around twiddling my thumbs or doing whatever you do in those days. So, but then what happens is her father is out one day and there's like an accident. Carriage breaks down. This woman's like, look, I gotta get to this place that's like miles away. I'm in a hurry. I have to get there. But my daughter is sick. And, I can't take her with me any further than this. Could I leave my daughter with you while I go do my business and then come back a month later, pick her up, and be on my way? And the father's like, sure, yeah, I'll take your daughter in and watch her. And he's like, I got a daughter at home, and they can be friends and play together, so, she'll be in good company, blah, blah, blah. And they make that arrangement. The girl comes to stay with them. The mother, at least that's the impression that you get, takes off, and then they're still with the girl. The girl that they bring in is Carmilla. And Carmilla is described, as kind of the, I guess you could, it's hard to explain. They just say, like, the most beautiful girl, I can't take your eyes off of her, you're just attracted to her. Which it's slightly a little creepy because it's like a 13-year-old girl or something like that. But it's sort of like almost like she's the embodiment of neoteny. And neoteny is that thing that, as you get older, if you still look youthful, you still retain youthful features that, just looking young for one thing, being playful, innocent, even your voice sounding young. Those are all neotenous features, and it's almost as like if you were to have that concept personified, that would be Carmilla. So everybody's just kind of drawn to her, So, but she ends up, at least you can't tell, even at the end of the story, it's kind of left ambiguous. But the impression is that she falls in love. Carmilla falls in love with the girl, and develops a crush, and she wants them to be friends and so forth forever. And it's not like they make out or have sex or anything like that, but they're very close to each other. Almost, I got the impression reading it there was almost just like very like sisters that were very, very close to each other. But other stories have just taken it as, like she's a lesbian, she likes women, and they run that theme. And in the movie versions that are based off of the story, you get a hybrid character. You never really get a pure Carmilla character. There are some movies that have tried, and they're pretty good. But usually it's more a mix of the Carmilla story and the Countess Bathory story, where you get this like older, bloodthirsty vampire lesbian. That's sort of the prototype, or just some sexually ambiguous woman who just will tear you apart. Or just or just even. No, that's pretty much what I want to say. Yeah. I mean, there are a few exceptions. You got the Kate Beckinsale, say, in the Underworld movies, where she's, a straight woman, but it's still the, at first she's the hunter and so forth. So she's still that bloodthirsty, just don't want to tear you apart, merciless, but young and beautiful looking. So there's still a bit of the hybrid, but they just sort of removed other elements and just, played it, no pun intended, straight. But other movies tend to just really go with the lesbian angle. But like I said, you can read the story yourself. It's debatable if she is or isn't, or if it's just she's using her, neoteny, if you will, as a, how do I want to word this? Yeah, I'm pausing. I'm just trying to think how I want to say all this. This is what happens when I go off script. I've got the script here, but I'm just like, yeah, I get this, just going pretty well here. With extra things that were just occurring to me as I was saying this, and I kind of lost my track of thought. But yeah, so it's more like, is she a lesbian, or is it like a hunting strategy that she kind of gets people in under her thrall and takes advantage of it that way? I took as the hunting strategy thing, but others, like I said, clearly taking the lesbian route. It's up to the reader to decide that. But but there are some things in there that are kind of cool. There's a point where you find out that Carmilla, it's not really her name. It's like an anagram of her name, which I forget. They mentioned several, where like over the years the same letters that spell out Carmilla. You see you hear about these figures in the past with those letters and that name, but just rearranged differently. So it might be like Marcilla or something like that instead of Carmilla. And so you get this sort of impression, but you find out impression that she'd been around in the past, just because of the descriptions of the girl that they talk about match Carmilla. And you also find out that what they call she's a member of the House of Karnstein, and this was sort of used later on in the movies, especially the Hammer films. They had what they called the Karnstein trilogy, where the vampires were all female, and that's really the only connection to Carmilla. But if you ever wondered why they call it the Karnstein trilogy, that's where it comes from. If you've ever seen those movies or heard of them, for that matter. But you find out that Carmilla is like a descendant or an ancestor of the girl's mother. And they have this old painting that they find that they want to show Carmilla of like 1,000 years ago or something like that, of the old Karnstein family at because they were this old, rich, powerful, the aristocratic family, just still going with that theme. And there's a painting of all of them, and one of the figures in the painting is Carmilla, and they're just like, hey, that looks just like you. It's a subtle nod to Varney the Vampire. So you can see even in the next major story, the influence Varney had on the next generation. So, and ultimately, I don't want to spoil the whole rest of the story, but that's basically the outline of Carmilla and the effect that it had on films, afterwards. Which is kind of weird, because really you do see some of the stuff. The first major film that kind of explored some of these themes was the Universal film Dracula's Daughter, where there's some sort of little bit of lesbian overtones. At least, again, it's debatable. You can see for yourself. But I can kind of see it. But it's still kind of a nod to Carmilla in a way. But later films really, started playing around with the themes of that film. But there's never really been a true Carmilla movie. I wish there was, because it'd be cool to see. But there's different ways of getting a close approximation of it. And the thing is also with Carmilla, before I forget, it's also the first vampire love story, which is kind of interesting because it's sort of I guess in a way, the vampire equivalent of like Romeo and Juliet, just two young teenagers in love, but one of them happens to be a vampire. And of course, like I was mentioning earlier, That's a big thing for my generation, where you had films, with the teenagers and so on. You had, like, the Lost Boys, obviously, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, both the movie and the TV show, plus Angel, and all these kind of examples, and thankfully the all the films that have come out, since movies have come out that have explored that theme of the young teenager, or one's a vampire, and the love story angle. At least it's always been shown respectfully. And all right, and last but not least, you know what I'm going to say next. It's Dracula. Bram Stoker's Dracula. What can I really say about this story? I mean, God, everybody knows Dracula. You think vampires, you think Dracula. And I mean, the reason why some of these stories that I've mentioned, the vampire, Barney, Carmilla, you might have heard of Carmilla. It pops up every now and again. But, the reason why you haven't really heard those, or even the old poetry stuff, you haven't heard a lot of the, stuff about revenants and so forth, is because since Dracula came out, it's just overshadowed everything. It just plowed through. And the thing about Dracula is that, it's kind of funny, because people think that it's the origin point of the vampire story, when really what it is it's like a best of, all the vampire stories prior to Dracula, set in one story. Plus, it adds a lot of things to it too. The first of which is, if you read the book, the thing that stands out most is if you were to really put Dracula in a in a movie version, but done exactly like the book, it would be what we now call a found footage film. And that's the setup of the story. It's these journal accounts, it's these newspaper accounts, eyewitness accounts, people telling us stories, and being interviewed, and them telling them their story, and it's all put together to paint the story that ends up being Dracula. But it's got the Polidori, the Count, it's the aristocratic vampire. It's also the ancient vampire. It's the running out of breath here. It's all those things. It's all the stuff from religion, the cross, the garlic, every bit of mythology of vampire origins are all, like I say, even back to Gilgamesh with the theme of a mortal being going out far from where humans live to a dark place where this immortal being lives with his wives. Even from that far back in time to when it was written, so all those things are all in one story. So it's like a best of, and that's what really makes it last the test of time. Is it's all timeless ideas that up to that point in time had already survived the test of time. So it's no surprise that it's still a very popular, very engaging, very interesting story. But the other thing is, and it's something that we forget now, but looking back on it, because it seems so old to us, but at the time, the thing that's interesting about Dracula is that it was like science fiction. I mean, it's hard to think of it like that way, but it really was. Due to advances in medicine, and it sort of foresaw a lot of things too. I mean, the interesting thing is, the story is, has this aspect where you get people that are suffering from illnesses and injuries that should kill them, but science keeps them alive. And it's sort of, we don't even think about it, but if you think about it, from Dracula's point of view, he would have only been able to feed on somebody once. But due to science, he could feed on the same person several times, which he does in the character of Lucy Westenra, where, she keeps getting blood transfusions from everybody, so Dracula can just keep feeding and get more bang for his buck from one person. And, we see this in real life, not that way, but a couple of decades later with World War I, where you've got all these soldiers that are would have been dead in previous wars due to the then, even you could see back when Bram Stoker was writing about this in Dracula, the science had advanced and medicine had advanced, that wounds that would have killed people in the past were now being kept alive. But to most people, that was still science fiction. So at the time, and plus you got the character of Van Helsing, who is all about science and reason. And really what it is it's the science rational age versus the ancient world mythology. And it's those two things meeting. And that's what keeps the story fresh, even to us today. Is these, we just keep getting updated versions of it in movies, but that's still the basic premise. Is it's the science fiction and fantasy, horror, ancient stuff, mythology, meeting in the middle. And that's what keeps it fresh. And it was a huge success when it came out. To the point where shortly after Dracula was written, plays of it were being made. The first one was written by Bram Stoker himself. And even in that one, from what I understand, he changed things from the story to adapt it to a different medium. And this is where, the point is between the literary age and the cinema age, it's Dracula bridges the gap, because it starts with the story, but then it gets adapted to plays. First, the first one by Stoker, then others took over after that with the Stoker family's approval, where they kept changing and adapting the story, so it was never exactly like the book. And that's sort of been the tradition, is every single thing that's based off of Dracula is not exactly Dracula, which is why we get so many, once the cinema age begins, so many adaptations, and you can just play around with the themes to make it work for that particular medium and that particular vision and version of Dracula that you want to make. So that's why you're able to have so many vampire films based even just off of Dracula, never mind taking elements and then making whole other movies based off of just those individual elements. So I think, I don't want to, if you've never read Dracula, I highly recommend it. It is a good story. So kind of rushed through that one, but I did it. I finished this pre-cinema vampire stuff. Yes. So join me next time when we get into the cinema age. And I'm going to talk about what I can, which is the silent era vampires. And I'll see you then.